From bone-shattering knockouts to blood-curdling injuries, here are the top 10 scariest finishes in UFC history. I'm starting off with a fight that literally ended a fighter's career. It's the one where Frank Shamrock and Igor Zinoviev fought each other. After a few exchanges, Shamrock grabbed Zinoviev, lifted him up, and slammed him down with a flash slam. From the moment the move hit, it was clear how powerful it was. Zinoviev was thrown awkwardly onto his collarbone, and Shamrock gave what would have been a hard fall even more force. Dave Meltzer, writing for a Bloody Elbow, said that Zinoviev had a broken collarbone and a broken C5 vertebra. In the end, Zinoviev never came back to the cage. This is a terrible incident for sure, but imagine if an injury could have been avoided and it wasn't, all because the referee wasn't doing his job. Well, let's look at the Matt Brown versus Pete Sell match to understand this better. There are many examples of fighters not getting good protection from referees, but Matt Brown and Pete Sell's fight in 2009 was probably the worst one in UFC history. The official record says that Brown won the fight by TKO at 1:32 of the first round. In reality, he won when at about 20 seconds of the first round, he hit Sell with 2 knees to the face, knocking him out. Sadly though, referees rarely notice when a player is out on his feet, and what happened next was a solid minute of beating without any competition. Brown beat Sell from one end of the cage to the other, but the entire time Sell was just trying to stay alive. Fighting hardcore opponents is definitely scary, but maybe what's even more terrifying is when you don't expect your opponent to demolish you. The Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Cro Cop fight taught us never to judge a book by its cover. Now, Gonzaga was supposed to be an easy opponent. The situation changed though when he tackled Cro Cop and beat him for a long time. Mirko was no longer comfortable, which gave Gonzaga the chance to let go and throw a huge head kick. It landed perfectly, knocking the Croat down where he was standing. The fight stands out even more, and it's especially scary because Cro Cop's leg twisted under him as he hit the canvas. Then there are some fights where it isn't that one blow that does it, but a series of blows that results in an opponent getting burnt out. And this is what happened in the Robbie Lawler versus Rory MacDonald fight. For 4 painful rounds, the fight went on until Lawler hit MacDonald hard in the nose with a right cross. The Canadian had taken harder hits earlier in the fight and had taken a lot worse in other fights. But that was the last punch he could take. So MacDonald just fell back, so tired and hurt that he couldn't even sit up by himself. Most people remember this fight for the heated words and fiery stare down in the middle of the fight, but what stands out most is when MacDonald was writhing on the ground. It honestly seems pretty scary to look at.
He's hurt. This may be it.
That's it. That's it.
It is all over.
Wow.
Robbie Lawler remains the welterweight champion.
But what's probably scarier is when fighters drop to the ground because they have actually broken bones. The fight between Frank Mir and Antonio Rodrigo is a pretty good example of this. In the first few minutes of the fight, Nogueira's punches quickly turned into strikes that could have ended the fight. He didn't try to end the fight right away with strikes though. Instead, he went for a guillotine choke that ended with Mir inside control. The former UFC champion grabbed a Kimura right away and kept Nogueira's arm from moving while he tried to roll away. The lock got tighter and tighter until Minotauro's arm could no longer be twisted anymore. Mir then gave him a second elbow right in the middle of his humerus. The ref saw the break right away, but it was already too late. The famous fighter broke a limb and it took 16 screws and a plate to fix it. Ouch. That sounds incredibly painful.
And then I never in my wildest dreams imagined the Kimura, the hammerlock, could have destroyed his humerus that way.
When it comes to taking damage like this though, few have suffered harder than Chuck Liddell. And his fight with Rashad Evans probably marked the worst point of his career. Evans, who was younger and faster, found his range quickly and began landing punches right away. Even though he still respected Liddell's power, he was like a snowball rolling down a hill until it seemed inevitable that it would stop. In fact, it happened in the second round when Evans threw a right hook that hit Liddell right on the chin. That one punch knocked out the former champion so badly that the referee had to roll him onto his back. And doctors on the side of the ring had to hold his head up. Then there are times when fighters literally add insult to injury instead of watering down the situation. I'm talking about Dan Henderson's fight with Michael Bisping. At UFC 100, Henderson gave the Brit probably the hardest punch of his entire career. Bisping was out cold as soon as the punch landed, but Hendo took it a step further by hitting him with a flying elbow as he lay unconscious on the ground. Henderson was unfazed though, and in the press conference after the fight, he literally added insult to injury by booing him over the elbow. If anyone else had boasted about an extracurricular shot that big, it could have been the end of their career. But for a famous person like Henderson, it was just another part of his legacy. Speaking of legacies, I know we're talking about horrifying finishes, but sometimes the techniques used by fighters are so well executed, it's almost beautiful. I'm looking at you, Edson Barboza and Terry Edom. During the whole fight, Barboza kept Edom at a distance he could handle and kept lowering his guard with low kicks and body punches. By the third round, he was used to Barboza's moves, so he was able to give him a clean wheel kick to the cheekbone. When the power was suddenly turned off, Edom's body stiffened up so much that when he fell backward, his arms didn't even touch the mat. Even though Barboza's beautiful technique could make this one of the most beautiful finishes in MMA history, the landing is what puts it on this list. And then imagine your knockout is so good that they put a designated name for it in the sport. Well, for Steve Nelmark, it happened after his fight with Tank Abbott. Now, after getting out of Nelmark's attempt to choke him with a guillotine, Abbott went on one of his most famous attacks. Nelmark was clearly shaken by this move, and Abbott kept on giving him more hell. When they got close, Abbott threw another right hand, and Nelmark went down in a twisted heap. The push puppet knockout became one of the first memes in MMA. And the word Nelmarking came to mean a scary, deconstruction-style knockout like that. Nelmark's loss would live on, but his career ended right then and there. In the end, I've saved up the match that everyone remembers because of the insane knockout, aka the Chris Weidman vs. Anderson Silva fight. After hitting Weidman's thigh hard with one blow, Silva started to throw them with confidence, maybe a little too much confidence. Weidman changed his strategy by blocking Silva's second kick with his shin and then his third kick with his knee. At the point of contact, there was a painful snap, and Silva fell back, holding his leg. The cameras followed Weidman as he was happy. And then they turned to Silva, who was clearly and audibly in a lot of pain. The damage was done, and fans will always remember that match for Silva's foot hanging off the rest of his leg.
I ended up getting the W. Obviously, the leg break thing, that just is terrible. That was, a terrible thing to happen. I know what it's like, obviously, now. It's a freaking nightmare situation.
And that's it for the top 10 scariest finishes in UFC history. Hope you had fun. See you in the next one.